Hello everyone, this is Lori at Cut and Paste Craft Studio. Welcome to our canvas painting class. We're going to be painting our skating penguin today. Now, I'm doing this on February 2nd and it's very snowy outside, so it seems appropriate, but you can paint this anytime you'd like to. I'm going to start you out with the things that you have to paint with. You're going to need 3 brushes. If you ordered them with this kit, you'll have the correct brushes. If you had brushes from previous canvas painting classes, you'll want to get out the 3 sizes that I have here. The wide one has a nice flat edge, and it's really good for painting backgrounds. The medium one also has a flat edge, which helps you draw, get right up there and do straight lines. It does nice medium places. The pointy one will help you get into little spots like this. When you are painting, you're going to need a bowl of water to clean your brushes with. And anytime you get a brush wet with paint, if you stop using it, even for just a minute or two, you're going to put it in that bowl of water. Otherwise, the paint's going to dry up really quickly and you're going to find it hard to clean your brushes. You're also going to need some paper towels to dry that brush off when you wash it. You're going to need the paints that we've poured for you. And you're going to need the canvas, of course, that we've traced for you. As I walk you through the painting, I'll be telling you which brush I'm using, but if you decide that you'd prefer to use a different brush, if you're finding the size I'm using difficult to use, you are welcome to switch to a smaller brush, whatever works for you. Just remember, the smaller the brush, the more brush strokes you're going to see. So try to use your bigger brush for your bigger spaces. Also, some details about using the paint. You don't want to get paint all the way up to the metal part of the brush. When you do that, the paint gets into those spaces and it's very hard to clean out. Generally, we're only going to dip our brush in about the third of the way up, or even a quarter of the way up. You don't need much more than that. It's better to go back and refill your brush more often than to have way too much paint on it. The same goes for those smaller brushes too. Now, all of your paints are numbered. You may have gotten your paints in little containers like this, plus you may have a bigger container like this one, or all of your paints may be in this size container, but they will be numbered so that you can follow along and do what I want to do. Now, if you decide that you don't like some of the colors, like perhaps you want different colors for the hat or the scarf, you can use paints you already have at home, particularly if you've done these canvases before, or you could mix a little white into your paint to make them a little lighter. If you wanted blue instead of green, you could mix a little white into this bright blue that we have and give yourself a light blue hat. I'm going to show you all the techniques that we do, and you can follow along with me. First off, take a look at my canvas here. Now, you're not going to have these bright, dark lines. I added these because the lines that you have on your canvas are very hard to see on camera. So I have gone over mine with a Sharpie to make it easier for you to see what I'm doing. But you don't need those, so you can just follow along with me. The first thing we're going to do is paint our background. And like I said, we're going to use this wide brush, and we're going to use not a huge amount of paint, and we're just going to start brushing the paint on. Now you can see pretty quickly I'm going to have to keep reloading. You could maybe go up to halfway up your brush with paint, but don't go any further up than that. I like to use these wider brushes for what I call the wide open spaces, and that means all this stuff on the edges, all the way up. You can get kind of close up to his flipper there, his fin. What do we call those? Are those his wings? They don't actually fly, do they? But then don't try to get right up next to it with your big brush unless you feel comfortable with that. If you've got a lot of good control, you can do that. One of the things I always recommend is that you brace your arm. You don't want to be painting up in the air like this. That means you're making the strokes with your arm rather than with your fingers. So I like to set my wrist on the table or on the canvas Now, if your canvas is wet, you may want to stop and go get a blow dryer so you're not laying your arm down in wet onto a wet canvas, but otherwise you could even just put your elbow down, and that will give you some good support there and make it easier to paint. Also, make sure you use that flat edge. It makes it really easy to do nice straight lines. For example, I'm going to take the flat of the edge of this brush straight up to that line where the bottom, this is where the sky meets the snowbank. And I'm going to use that to pull away. Now, I didn't get my line perfect. That's okay. The line between the sky and the snow doesn't have to be exact. You can make yours a little different from what the drawing is if you want to. Again, I'm using that flat edge of the brush to go up and make little straight lines. Now, you do not want big clumps of paint. If you see big clumps of paint, go back and brush them out. Now, I'm at the point where I'm ready to do some parts up here or over here, but look how uncomfortable that is. I'm going to move my arm around. It makes it difficult to do. So, first rule of painting is turn your canvas. I always recommend turning that canvas so you find it more easy to get to spots that are that need painting. There's no reason you have to keep that canvas straight up and down. You could paint the whole thing upside down or on its side and it wouldn't make a difference. In fact, I think to get this edge, I'm going to have to go totally upside down. See how I'm going straight up to that line. Reload here a little bit. And then I pull away. And then I always keep going back and back and back and making sure that I've got all of my paint brushed out so I don't have huge clumps anywhere. Clumps don't dry very nicely. They're actually pretty tough to get dry, and then you end up with bubbles in the paint that you could then later bump and pop if they don't dry all the way. Long, smooth strokes to just brush everything out. Reloading my brush frequently so that you can see my paint's creeping up a little bit. It's at about halfway up that brush, so I don't want to go any higher than that with the paint on my brush. Now I went with this dark blue because I thought he's skating at night. Ice skating on a pond at night is a really cool experience if you've never gotten to do that. Of course, around Kentucky, we don't often get ponds that freeze up well enough to skate on. And I sure wouldn't do it at night if I wasn't sure about the ice. We have a pond behind our house right now that has ice on it, but I don't think anything heavier than a duck could walk on that ice without cracking through. So it's pretty to look at, but not very safe. Now again, I'm using that flat edge. I'm going right up to my line and pulling away. Now, you may feel like I'm painting way too fast. That's okay. You're watching this on YouTube. So you can stop whenever you want, pause my video, and catch up. Then you're not going to feel like you're getting behind. You can also stop and go use the blow dryer if you feel the need to, if you want to get your canvas dried up so that when you brace your arm, I'm seeing some clumps over there, so I'm going to brush them out. Also, if you, at the end of the canvas painting is a good time to go back and say, look, I've got a little spot there I've missed. Now I'm going to go in here just a little bit, but I think the rest of that I'm going to have to get with my smaller brush. Some people also ask me about the sides. Some people like to paint the sides of their canvas so that it, say, the sky is dark blue all the way across. You're welcome to do that at any time. Now, I'm ready to switch to a smaller brush to get control of some of these details. So what do I do with this big brush? He goes straight in the water. And I recommend, when you've got that much paint on the brush, that you kind of swirl it around a little bit, tap it on the bottom, and then just let it sit there. and it's going to stay in that water until we're ready to use it again. I don't want to let any of that paint dry out. So I'm switching now to my small paintbrush, and I like to kind of spin it around as I put it into the paint I'm going to use. And again, don't go any more than halfway up on this brush, and get that wrist sitting down on the table. That way you've got much more control. Your wrist is holding your hand steady so you're not shaking a bit. And I like to use this pointy brush to outline. Now I find it harder to keep from getting clumps when I'm using a brush like this. So that's why it is important to make sure you don't have too much paint on there. If you have too much, go over here and wipe some of it off. See if you've got a little white spot on your canvas that could use a little extra paint, and that'll get rid of any clumps of paint you have on that brush. It's also important, notice how I'm holding my brush. I'm holding it like a pencil, and I'm holding it near this metal part. I believe that's called a ferrule. But if you hold your brush out here, I sometimes see my friends doing this in painting classes. It's much harder to control way out there. When you have it here, you've got a steadier hand and better control. Now right now I'm resting my wrist on the edge of this canvas, and it's still a little damp, so I may get a little paint on my arm. That is okay. This paint does wash off of skin. It does not wash off of clothing, so do be careful with your clothes and try not to paint wearing your best brand new outfit. I'm going to get in all these little nooks and crannies with that pointy brush. And right now I am seeing a couple of other nooks and crannies where I was using the bigger brush and therefore I did not get into those corners very well. Now you may see spots that you think need touching up later. Feel free to go back and do that. Again, one of the things we said about using a smaller brush is that you'll get brush strokes, and I think you can see that I've got a little bit of brush stroke action going on over here. I'm going to switch to my medium brush, load it with just a tiny bit of paint, not a ton, and just kind of smooth out those areas that have brush strokes. Now part of what you're seeing here is more light reflects off wet canvas than dry, so that's some of what you're seeing on my camera. And people will ask me how much do I need a second coat, what kind of coverage do I get. Don't make a decision about putting a second coat of paint on until you have completely dried that first coat. So either let it sit and go back and work on it a little bit at the end, or run and get your blow dryer. That's the best thing. Now make sure Mom says it's okay to use that blow dryer, and you may want to make sure you don't have paint all over your hands, or you'll end up with a blow dryer that looks like the ones we have in our studio. If you've been here, you've seen them. They are completely covered in paint. All right, you can stop right now and go give this a quick blow dry. I'm going to do that, so I'm going to pause the video because you don't want to listen to me blow dry. All right, my canvas is nice and dried up. That means when I go to paint more, I can rest that wrist right there on the blue and I won't get any more paint on me. I'm going to start working on the black parts of my penguin. That's going to be these two little wings, these little side parts on his belly, and the side parts on his face. I think I'm going to start with my pointy brush, and that means I've got to clean it off. Now, when you clean off a brush, you want to tap it down in that water quite a bit to get as much paint off as you can. But you also want to pull it, press down hard and pull it sideways. Don't press down this way. Pull it sideways and get all that paint off. If you see any more on there, you can kind of use the paper towel to really work on it until you don't see any more blue paint when you when you wipe it on that paper towel. Now again, the way I like to load a painty brush is to set it just the tip in, and then I swirl it around. And that helps me keep the point on my brush. I'm holding it against the side of that well. If you've got one of these little pots, you can hold it against the side of the well of the pot, and that helps keep a point on that rather than getting a big fluffy brush. So I'm going to use that point carefully to go in, and I like to use, again, I'm not using very much paint, and I'm going to use that pointy brush with my wrist resting on the canvas, and I'm going to outline the part of the penguin that is black. And this one is a narrow enough space that even after I've outlined it, I've pretty much filled it all the way in. But if you were doing a big space, you could outline and then fill it in like that. And I'm going to go, I'm not going to switch over here right now because then I'd be setting my hand on that black paint. So I'm going to finish all the black on this side before I move on. Now I've got him all the way outlined, so I'm going to go fill him in, kind of using this brush sideways. Now you could use a bigger brush at this point if you wanted to. With the black, because it covers so well, you're not going to get as many brush strokes, so it's not as critical to move up to a bigger brush right now. Now again, I'm going to complete everything on this side of my penguin before I turn him and work on the other side. And this is the little black part on the side of his face. Now, if you went over the line with your blue and got a little too much on your penguin, that's okay. Black covers up really nicely. So I've got this side, everything that's black on this side, I've got that done. So now I'm going to flip him around and start to work on the other side. Now his eyes will be black too, so you can go ahead and fill those in if you want. Just use the tiny tip of your brush to do that with. And we'll add some more accents to those eyes later so he doesn't just look like he's staring off into space like that. But we want that part of the black to be super dry before we do that, so we'll do it now. And it'll be ready to add to later on. All right. Now, you'll notice right here that his his wing goes right up against his body. So you're going to paint straight over that line. And we're going to add a little accent later with white to kind of show where that division between the wing and the arm is. Now I'm getting a little uncomfortable with having to hold my hand, so what do? I turn my canvas. You do the same, but you do it when you need to, not when I need to. Smooth out my brush strokes there. And again, I think I need to go back upside down again to get into the side of his body without dipping my elbow or my wrist in the paint. Now you can see, well, you may not be able to see it, but I had a little spot here where the blue went right over that line and the black covers it up just beautifully. That's the best part about black paint is that it just doesn't take very many coats. All right. I have all of my black painted. Now again, you could stop right here and go blow dry it if you want to. I'm going to let it sit because I'm not going to work right next to the black for a little bit. I'm going to work down here, so it's easier for me to just let that dry without using the blow dryer. Now, this time I am using my big wide brush again, And again, I want to really press down hard as I dry off that brush to get all that blue out, because it will show up when you start to use white if you're not careful. However, we are going to be shading like this area here with a little bit of blue. So if you do see a tiny bit of light blue show up in your white because it came off your brush, don't worry too much about it. Snow has shadows in it, and we often use light blue to make those shadows. Now I am painting right over the lines that I used to make the shape of the pond that he's skating on. But that's okay, because we don't really have to have that a perfect oval, and really with just one coat of paint, once it dries, your lines are probably going to show up. If they don't show up, then you just go back with a pencil and sketch where you'd like to have your pond. Now look at this. I'm painting right over the skate blades. The blades at the bottom of the skates, I'm going to paint right over. You again should probably be able to see them, but they're super simple to paint. You could sketch them with a pencil later on if you want to. And we're painting white on white, so it's not critical for it to be absolutely perfect. I'm going to turn my canvas so that I can get to this edge. I'm going to use that trick where I go straight up to the edge, place my brush on the line, and pull away. I can do the same thing as I come right up next to those skates. Now you might be asking, why are we painting white when it's already white? I think it helps the picture if you have the same sort of, what's the word I want? The same texture. Painted surface looks different than bare canvas. So if you don't paint it, it continues to look like bare canvas. So we just want to get the same sort of shine to everything. Let's see, what are we ready for next? Oh, I think we're ready to paint his belly. I'm going to shift down to a smaller brush to do that. Again, if your black is still really wet, you may want to pause this video and go blow dry it. I'm going to use my medium brush to do the belly and the face. So I really want to get all the blue out of it, since we used that a little earlier. Again, don't clog that brush up with way too much paint, and just give a nice coat. If you've still got wet black paint, stay away from those edges. And you guys, take a pause if I'm painting too fast for you. This little spot down here, we're going to go back and add a little touch of accent a little later to show where that goes. So mine looks black because I used that black marker. Yours isn't going to look that way. So you can come up here and paint the face. You can paint right over that beak, but I would go around the eyeballs. Again, you don't have to get super good coverage here because it's white on white. There we go. And then let's put a little coat of paint. I'm going to switch and use my pointy brush. But this is a little pom-pom at the top of his hat. And I'm going to switch to a small brush to do that because I feel like I have better control. All right. Boy, we are just moving along here. He is coming together. Now, this is the point where you need to decide how you want to color his scarf and his hat. I have given you a pale green and a purple, and you can choose what you want to do with those colors. You could mix a little of your blue with your teal, with your pale green, and you could make that more of a teal color if you would prefer that. You could add a little white to your purple and make it a little lighter like that. Those are your choices. And let's see, when you do that, don't get the other colors into your white. Because you're going to be using that white again, what you may want to do is scoop a tiny bit of the white out, mix it into the purple, and then clean that brush. So don't put the purple into the white, put the white into the purple. The same thing with this blue. We're going to use this blue later, so if you choose to make your green a little more teal, take a tiny scoop out of the blue and mix it into that green. So that is what you'll get started doing next, and I'm going to, let's see, I think I'll start with my medium brush. I'm going to clean him off super well. And, let's start with this. I'm going to do his scarf in pale green. And I like to paint pulling down toward me like this. I'm using that flat edge. I can either use the flat edge to go up to the line and pull away, or I can use that edge and very carefully, this is where you want to go really slowly, pull it along that edge, and it'll give you a really good straight line. You can do the same thing going in this direction, but you'll need to load your brush a little more along that edge. Now we'll add some little accents to that scarf a little later. And again, and you can paint right over these edges here. That's just the knot where we tied his scarf, and we'll add some accents there later. Now I think I better switch to my smaller brush to get into those details there. I'm going to go completely, let's see, where am I going to go? I think I'm going to go this way so that I can get to, these are the ends of the scarf. And we will add some fringe to that scarf later. You have a toothpick in your supplies, and we're going to actually use that toothpick to add fringe. If you accidentally threw away that toothpick, any toothpick will do. You could also use a mechanical pencil and dip the tip of it into the paint, and that would work like a Q-tip as well. Now, you may decide later that you want a second coat of this this light green, because it is a very light color and it doesn't necessarily cover the way you'd like it to. But make sure that before you put on a second coat, you dry the first coat. If you add wet paint to wet paint, you're just moving paint around. Now, I'm also going to do the brim of my hat. The brim is this part here. Now you could have switched to the bigger brush to do this because it's a nice big space, and I think I'll do that for right now. I need to switch again, just so I can get that top edge really smooth. See, I'm using that flat edge of the brush to curve it around. Now I'm using this same size brush to get the edge. You could switch to a smaller brush to get that little curved edge there. It's whatever you feel comfortable with. There we go. Those are the two parts that I'm going to do with that purple. Purple with that green. Now, I talked to you about mixing colors if you want to, so I'm going to show you real quickly how I would mix up my colors. I think I'm going to make this purple a little bit lighter. I'm going to take my small brush and I'm going to use it as a scooper. Now try to make sure you don't get all the way up to the black part, to that the metal part, and I'm going to put a little in there. That looks like about enough. And then I'm going to wipe that brush off, and then I like to mix with the wrong end of my paintbrush. That way I don't end up getting way too much paint up into the top of my brush, and it makes it hard to clean out. Super easy to clean the wrong end of a brush. There we go. That's how you stir up a fresh color of paint. So I'm going to use this lighter purple that I just made to paint his boots and to paint the top of his hat. Remember, I like to outline using the tip of the brush. And then kind of fill it in. Now lighter colors, and actually any purple or red or yellow and most greens will often take a second coat of paint. So feel free to go back afterwards, after we're done painting, and put a second coat on. I won't make you sit through me putting a whole second coat on. Hold your brush a little bit sideways and brush out any brush strokes that you got there. Then we're going to go up here and paint the top part of his hat. I'm going to outline it first. You know, it would be fun if you have any craft supplies in your house and you had any little pom-poms maybe left over from a craft kit. It would be fun to glue a pom-pom onto the top of the hat, make it sort of three-dimensional. All right, there we go. I'm going to brush out those brush strokes again using the side of my brush. And this would definitely need a second coat. So if you get to that point, you can dry it up and then, or just let it sit for a little while and add that second coat, and I think you'll see a big difference. Now I'm going to dry up my tiny brush and dip into this orange paint. Orange is another color that will definitely take 2 coats to cover up. But I'm not going to make you sit and watch me do all that. So, all right, we have got all the basics of our penguin painted. Now, what I'm going to do next is I want to add a sort of a highlighting to this pond so it stands out from the rest of your snow. Your snow is white. You need your pond to look a little different. So we're gonna make a little bit of a light blue. We don't need much. And we're actually gonna make a light blue wash. So again, I'm gonna work in the center of my palette. What you could do is use, this is a great thing, the lid to one of your cups. Here, I'll show you how that works. You take one of these lids and you can use it to mix in. So I'm going to take a scoop of white. Again, I don't want to ruin my white because I'm going to need some of it later. So I'm going to make sure I scoop it off, and then I'll wash that brush out and take just like a corner scoop of this blue. I just want a little of the blue, all right? And then I'm going to put a little bit of it into this white like that, scrape it off like that, and then remember how we stirred with the wrong end of a paintbrush. All right, now we have a light blue there, very light blue. Now, we're not going to use full strength paint. We're going to make kind of a wash. So I'm cleaning my brush off in the water, and then I'm going to wipe it off really well. And then I'm going to put my brush, I always tell you all not to do this, but for this, for a wash, we do. I'm going to get my brush wet. I'm not going to wipe it off, and I'm going to put it straight into this light blue paint that I just made. And I'm going to swirl it around and then kind of wipe my brush off, okay? And then you're going to use this kind of runny light blue paint. Just put a little on your brush and then just sort of start outlining your pond. And you want it to be kind of streaky. You don't want it to be perfect. And just go across. You can go right over the skate, the blades on the skate. If you get too much paint, go back and get some more water and brush that out. You want it really nice and light. It doesn't have to go all the way up to the skate. And get in between there. And you want it kind of streaky and messy, so you kind of go around. If you get a little too much on there, take a clean paper towel and just pat it over there, take a little off, and then brush it out a little more. And that gives us that look of, I'm kind of icy here. All right, if it's too dark, it's because you've gotten too, you didn't get enough water on there, so you could always add a little more water to your paint, make it a little wetter, and just kind of brush that out. And that gives me a nice kind of light blue, icy look to my skating rink, or my pond, as we might want to call it. I think we've got some other things we can do to, I like it to look like a windy, cold day. So as you can see, on this one, I used my pointy brush with small amounts of white paint, and I just went whoosh, whoosh. And if I didn't get enough paint on there, I went back and added a little more, and I just made swirls around like this. And that's very easy to do, or I'm going to show you another little technique that I like that I think makes it look even chillier. If you need to, you could trace out what you're about to do with a pencil, make it easier to follow. You want your brush to be nice and dry. I'm going to use the small brush. I'm going to use a small amount of white paint, and then I'm going to start to make my swirl, but this time I'm going to make it a dashed line like this. All right, and I'm going to just keep filling the space. You do your swirls wherever you like. Your swirls don't have to be where mine are. You could make some of your swirls come up to the penguin and stop, and then come out the other side. I might like to finish that swirl, make it a little further in. Or you could swirl it kind of the other direction too. And I just think this dashed line technique kind of looks cool like that. Now, if we'd like to make it even cooler, we're going to use a couple of other colors to do this with. So how about the silver? We'll take just a touch of my silver and go right next to the white, and just kind of go make the dashes right near it. You could even dash a little before or a little after it, and that just gives it a little more dimension. We did this in a snowman class last year, and we completely covered the background with these swirls, and I think we ended up using about 4 different colors. But I just love the look. You can use the dashed lines. You could use the straight lines that I did. You could do no lines at all and do a splatter paint. Now, I recommend doing the splatter paint before you paint the whole penguin. So like do the black and then splatter like snowflakes on it and then paint over it. And that would be an easier way to do. The best way to do a splatter is to mix a little white with some water and then flick the brush across your finger. But make sure you've got a wide open space, that you're wearing something over your clothes, or you've got an old t-shirt on, because splattering goes everywhere. So you could do all kinds of touches. If you wanted to add to these swirls and make it look even windier, you could mix up a little more of the light blue and don't add water to it, and then you could layer it that way too. You could do several layers of the white so that it got wider and wider and wider if you wanted to. You could make the swirls to the point where they almost cover the whole the whole background. It's up to you. You get it as far as you would like it to go. Now we've got a few other things we need to do to add some really cool accents to this guy to kind of finish him off. Let's get our little tiny brush again. Let's clean him off, and let's do just the very tip of our brush in silver. And we're going to draw two very short straight lines, one coming down from the toe and one from the heel. If you can still see your lines, then that's what you're doing, is you're painting the little parts where they attach the blades of the skate to the shoe of the skate. And then you're going to just do kind of a curved line around underneath, and that will be the blade of your skate. If you can't see your lines anymore, you just draw kind of a blade shape there with a pencil. If you don't feel comfortable with that, see if Mom or Dad could help you. All right, we've got our blades on our skate now. Now, I told you I was going to add something here. I've still got that dark line because I used the marker to highlight. You're not going to see your line as well, so you're going to want to add just a touch of black line very carefully between his boots. That shows where the bottom of his little bottom is. All right, then let's clean off that pointy brush and let's do some accents with a little bit of white paint. I think it always, I'm not sure what they're officially called, but we call them shine marks. And it helps you see some little details. So again, just a tiny amount of paint on the tip, all right? And keep that tip pointy. And remember how I said the belly and the wing were getting kind of separated? You just want to touch very lightly there to show where that difference is. And I think I have a little too much paint on my brush, so I wiped it off. You could do, and this is where you're just barely touching your penguin. You're not pushing down hard, you're just barely dragging it across the edge. And see how I'm just kind of wisping, like whoosh, whoosh. And I just give a little, whoosh, just a whisper of color. If you have too much paint on your brush, wipe it off on your paper towel and just add some little wisps of color right there. Now we might want to add a little wisp of color right here where our scarf has some little lines showing where the end of the scarf is. You could kind of draw a little, almost like a square or a circle there to show where the knot was tied in his scarf. And I'm going to go a little sideways here. You could add some little wisps of color across the scarf like that if you wanted to. Same thing up here on the hat if you want to give him a little wisp there and there, little shine marks to make it stand out. Make sure you've got paint on a very pointy end of your brush, and you could do some little marks here and here on the shoes that make it look like lacing. Now I think we're ready to add a couple of polka dots. I don't like to do polka dots until the very end, because if you've ever done polka dots with us in the shop, you know they take forever to dry. So take your smallest brush and use the wrong end of it. Dip it straight into your white, and then just barely touch it to the center of your black eyes. And you get 2 little white dots there. Now, if you wanted a polka dot hat, you could put more paint on the tip of your end of your brush, and we could start adding some polka dots to that hat, just like that. If you wanted, you are going to want to put some fringe on your scarf. Forgot to get my toothpick out, so you all go find your toothpick. Or like I said, if you don't have one or if you lost yours, you could use the end of a mechanical pencil, and you're going to dip your toothpick into that white paint, and then you're just going to use the tip of it and pull down. Look how tiny a line you get with that. I'm not holding the toothpick straight up and down. I'm holding it at an angle, and I'm pressing down and pulling away so that it is thicker up near the scarf and it gets thinner as it comes down. And you want to do a little fringe right there too. Now, there are some techniques you could do. Say you wanted to have your scarf have stripes on it. I like to do those with my medium-sized brush. I dip it straight down into my paint. I kind of fluff it up a little bit because a stripe on a knitted scarf is not perfectly straight. It's kind of ruffly. So I'm going to go straight down into my paint like that, and I'm going to hold my brush straight up and down, and I'm going to kind of tap it down. And I'm going to make sort of soft looking stripes. I'm not brushing, I'm tapping. And you could do the same thing all the way down. Now it's going to get a little tough here on this part of the scarf, so I would tilt my brush up on the side, so I'm just tapping with the corner. And now I have a striped scarf. Let's see if you can see that closely. There you go. See how my lines are not perfectly straight? They're kind of fluffy because a knitted scarf is kind of fluffy. Now I am at the end. I don't have anything to tell you else to do unless you want to add more to your project. You could paint a snowman. Take your white brush and make a swirl right there and make a smaller swirl on top of it. And then you could paint a black hat if you wanted, or a purple hat or something like that on your snowman. Oh, but before we go, this is my favorite trick for snowmen. Take the smallest brush, and you're going to want to make a carrot nose. And the easiest way to make a carrot nose is to stick the smallest end of your wrong end of your smallest paintbrush. Go straight into that paint, set it down, don't lift up. Drag it. See how perfect that carrot nose comes out? So then you could do the eyes for the snowman the same way. Use the black and just dot, dot. You could make his mouth dot, 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 like that. So customize this any way you want, but be sure before you're done that somewhere on your canvas, either on the edge or on the back or even right down here, you write your name and the date. I like to initial mine, and I'm going to say this is 2021. There you go. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to see what you do with this.